As we turn our attention over to the grain markets now, this week we were joined by Doug Simon from Tredas. To begin the week, India's government confirmed that they would be banning wheat exports later this summer. Global buyers were banking on the world's second biggest wheat producer for their supplies for exports amid the ongoing war in Ukraine. And that's where we began the discussion with Doug on Wednesday morning.
Well, it's at the end of last week, we had a jump up in futures prices after the WASDE report, and part of it was about the wheat. But then when that came out, when they were going to ban exports, because India produces, surprisingly, they're the second largest producer of wheat in the world, produce about 105 million metric tons. The largest producer is actually China. They produce about 135 million metric tons of wheat, and European Union is about that same size. So those are the three biggest wheat producers in the world. But India was supposed to export maybe 9 million metric tons of wheat. Well, when they said that they're going to ban exports, and potentially maybe even have to import some wheat because it's been very dry over there, really got the wheat market that's already tight in a big tizzy. And so prices have up pretty aggressively this last week. I mean, we were up 82-cent range, I think, yesterday on Tuesday, and now this morning we're back down 50 cents.
Well, you mentioned that, and happening this week alongside that news is the annual wheat tour that hits parts of Nebraska, but largely the state of Kansas. And so far the reports that we've seen as we have this conversation today, about an expectation with what USDA is saying, pretty poor crop when it comes to winter wheat. All that tells you there's not enough wheat to meet the demand right now, right?
Right, and that's why we're seeing such volatile prices. We put in a high, like I said, yesterday, up in the upper $13 level. Had been down after the war broke out. We had kind of fallen back to 10. So we've seen a lot of volatility in the wheat market, and so everybody's trying to figure out how much is going to be exported, where it's going to come from. So there's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's coupled largely because of Ukraine. I mean, the Ukraine last year, produced 33 million metric tons of wheat, and they're saying that maybe they're only going to export, maybe raise 20 and maybe export maybe 10 million metric tons this year. So there's, between the corn and the wheat that's lost out of the Ukraine, out of a production standpoint and export side of it, our balance sheets, the export available supplies have tightened up pretty dramatically. And I think 3 months ago when this all broke out, I think that's what, right away you went to those bottom line balance sheets of how tight things could potentially get. And on the news this morning, listening, they were just talking about the United Nations permanent ambassador from the US was talking about world famine. Big issue for like North Africa and other places in the Middle East that import a lot of wheat. Where's it going to come from? If it's not going to come from Ukraine or Russia, India maybe, now not so much. So we've got ourselves in a tight market.
Mm-hmm. Back here domestically, when it comes to the row crops, I think if we looked at a word to summarize the planting season we've had so far, a lot of producers would say frustrating. Too wet, too dry. Now we're talking frost and snow in some places.
Yeah.
As you think about these planting conditions that people are trying to get the crop into right now, what does that tell you about the markets as we look to the trade through this growing season?
It's kind of representative. If you look at soil moisture across the U.S., it's wet in the eastern corn belt and up in the north, and then you go to the south and southwest, it's so dry. That's kind of the planting pace that we've seen. We were so dry out west that we couldn't plant, 3 weeks ago, and now we've been fortunate, been blessed with some rains, but it's still too wet up in the north. So it's created a lot of frustration. We're still about 50% planted on the corn crop. We're probably, about 20 points below, normal. Last Thursday, I was out up north, Wahoo, Hooper. It's like everywhere you look, there were multiple planters. We can plant this crop very fast. We've got some clients up in the Dakotas. They said, we're going to get it planted. There's some frustrations, but they're going to get it done. So I think the bigger picture is going to be as we go into the summer, what's the weather going to be like once we get the crop in the ground? And the forecasts are a little warm, a little dry. Through all the forecasts I see right now, which is not conducive for a record crop, it's going to be. I think there'll be a lot of worry as we go through the summer to see how that weather turns out. If we continue to get the moisture that we've had here lately.
Mm-hmm. Had a viewer question about the word recession. I want to avoid that. You mentioned a word I liked instead. You called it a drag on the economy. Give me your 2 cents of what you see right now. Do you expect a slowdown in the global economy and domestic economy as well?
Absolutely. Whenever you have inflation like that, we go back to 2008 when we had high housing prices and the mortgage-backed security crisis, and we had oil at 150 and gas was at $4. People's balance sheets, you're spending more on driving, you're spending more on interest, on homes. You don't have as much money to spend on other areas, and then it's going to be a drag on the economy at some point. The question is how, the banking industry is a lot more liquid, stable than it was in 2008, but it'll definitely have impact over time. I don't know if it's going to be a recession, but it's definitely going to be a drag on it. I mean, you're seeing that through the stock market right now. People are trying to determine what those earnings are going to be.
Well, let's wrap up here. I always like to get your 2 cents on ways a producer could protect themselves right now. What are some of your thoughts as you have here in the middle of May?
Yeah, this morning I was talking to a farmer about some 750 like Dees puts. You can sell like an 850 Dees call. It's going to cap you out at 850 if we go up through there, but at least it gives you a floor at 750. It was about 25 cents this morning. You can do something on some short dated puts that are closer to 20 cents, but there's some things you can do to buy those puts. You're going to put a cap on it. And if you don't like that, you just go out and spend the money on the puts or hedge it and maybe buy a call out of the money call with it. But there's some things at this point, all the things that I'm talking about, you can't predict that stuff. So you got to look at your portfolio and say, how much do I want to have sold? It's not like going to Iowa and putting all your corn crop on the table and rolling dice on it. You want to protect some of that. You're not going to take try to guess what that thing's going to do, what those prices are going to do in your home. You've got tremendous prices with good break evens despite the higher inputs. We've got great profit levels, so it's like, okay, let's try to get some of this sold. We're in the time frame of the year where we need to be doing that.